Fog shrouded the sleepy village of St. Mary Mead, where whispers of a ghostly figure stalked the misty lanes, vanishing victims into the night without a trace. A chill runs down your spine as the phantom's secret unravels. Welcome to the gripping tale of Miss Marple's Phantom in the Fog. Grab a cup of tea, settle into your favorite seat, and let the mystery unfold. If you're hooked on this story, hit that subscribe button. Your support means the world to us. Chapter 1. The Misty Arrival. The fog crept into St. Mary Mead like a thief, wrapping the village's cosy cottages and winding lanes in a ghostly veil. It was autumn 1952, and Miss Jane Marple, a sharp-eyed spinster in her 70s, sat by her parlour window, knitting a scarf for her nephew. Her silver hair was neatly pinned, her spectacles catching the flicker of the firelight. Outside, the fog muffled every sound, turning familiar shapes into eerie shadows. "Fog hides things," she murmured, her needles clicking steadily. She didn't know it yet, but this fog would soon cloak a mystery that would unsettle the entire village. A stranger arrived that evening on the last train. Elias Thorne, tall and gaunt with eyes that darted nervously, stepped onto the platform clutching a worn suitcase. The station master, Mr. Higgins, squinted through the mist. "Careful out there, sir. Fog's thick as wool tonight." Elias gave a curt nod, his coat collar high, and disappeared toward the Fox and Hound Inn. By morning, whispers about him spread like wildfire. Mrs. Price, the postmistress, leaned over her counter, telling customers, "He's got a look about him, like he's running from trouble." In St. Mary Mead, news travelled faster than the post. Miss Marple heard of Elias during her walk to the vicarage. The fog lingered, draping the church spire in a hazy shroud. She met Dolly Bantry, her friend from the manor house, walking her spaniel. "Jane, there's a new man at the inn," Dolly said, her eyes bright with curiosity. "Arrived last night, all secretive." Miss Marple smiled faintly. "Strangers always stir talk, Dolly, likely just passing through." But her instincts, honed by years of quiet observation, sensed otherwise. Strangers in St. Mary Mead often brought secrets. Elias kept to himself, taking long walks by the river where the fog hung heaviest. Villagers spotted him there, staring into the water as if it held answers. Tommy Pierce, the baker's boy, swore he saw Elias muttering about "a phantom that follows." The grocer, Mr. Jenkins, laughed it off. "Fog plays tricks, lad. No ghosts here." But that night, as the fog thickened, a scream shattered the silence. Miss Marple, reading by her fireside with a cup of cocoa, set her book down. The sound came from the inn's direction. Peering out, she saw only swirling mist. Soon, voices rose and footsteps echoed on the cobbles. By morning, the village buzzed with grim news. Mrs. Eleanor Croft, the innkeeper's wife, had vanished. She'd gone to the garden for herbs and never returned. Her husband, Mr. Croft, found only her basket overturned on the path. "It's like the fog swallowed her," he told Constable Hurst, his voice breaking. The constable, a sturdy man with a broom-like moustache, surveyed the garden. No signs of a struggle. Maybe she got lost? But the villagers weren't so sure. Mrs. Weatherby, who lived nearby, claimed she saw a shadowy figure near the inn before the scream. "Tall, thin, like a ghost," she whispered, clutching her shawl. Miss Marple visited the inn, bringing a jar of her jam as an excuse. She noticed Elias in the common room, half hidden behind a newspaper, his hands trembling slightly. She chatted with Bessie, the barmaid, who mentioned an argument between Mrs. Croft and Elias earlier. Something about a letter he got. "Fancy seal," she said. Miss Marple nodded, her mind filing it away. She joined a search party by the river, her sensible shoes squelching in the mud. They found a glove, Mrs. Croft's with her initials, lying near the bank. "Odd," Miss Marple said softly. "It's clean, no mud." Constable Hurst frowned but said nothing. The search continued, lanterns bobbing in the fog like lost stars. Villagers whispered of the phantom, their fear growing with the mist. Miss Marple, back home, sat by her fire, pondering. Elias's arrival, the letter, the glove, it all felt connected. She recalled old cases, a disappearance staged for money, a betrayal masked by weather. People are predictable, she thought. But as midnight struck, another faint scream echoed from the distance. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. The fog was hiding something, or someone. This chapter introduces our clever detective and a stranger who stirred the village's peace. The mystery deepens, pulling us toward the secrets waiting in the mist. Chapter 2. Shadows in the Mist. The morning after the glove was found, St. Mary Mead woke to a fog so dense it seemed the village floated in a dream. Church bells rang faintly, their sounds swallowed by the heavy air. Miss Jane Marple, wrapped in a woolen shawl, stepped out early, her sharp eyes scanning the quiet lanes. She headed toward the Fox and Hound, drawn by a hunch that the inn held more secrets than its creaky sign suggested. The village was restless, whispers of the vanished innkeeper's wife now mingling with tales of that distant scream heard at midnight. A new tension gripped the cobblestone streets, as if the fog itself was watching. Inside the inn, the common room smelled of stale ale and wood smoke. Elias Thorne sat alone at a corner table, his breakfast untouched. His gaunt face looked paler today, shadows under his eyes like bruises. Miss Marple, carrying a basket of apples as an excuse for her visit, greeted the barmaid, Bessie, with a warm smile. "A chilly morning, isn't it?" she said, settling near the fire. Bessie nodded, her hands busy polishing a glass. "Chilly and strange, Miss Marple. Folks are saying the phantom took Mrs. Croft, and now they're scared to walk alone." Miss Marple's eyes flicked to Elias, who was staring into his coffee as if it held answers. Across the village, Constable Hurst gathered a small group at the town hall, a stone building with ivy climbing its walls. He stood on the steps, his mustache twitching as he addressed the volunteers. "We're searching the old mill today," he announced. "It's been empty for years, but the river path leads there, and that glove was found nearby." The crowd murmured, some eager, others hesitant. Young Tommy Pierce, the baker's boy, piped up, "What if the phantom's hiding there? My mate saw a shadow by the mill last week." Hurst frowned. "No ghost stories, lad. We're looking for facts." But the seed of fear was planted, and the volunteers' faces showed it as they set off, their boots crunching on frost-covered grass. At the mill, the air was damp, and the old water wheel creaked despite being still. The building loomed, its broken windows like empty eyes. The search party spread out, poking through cobwebs and rusted machinery. Harry, the young farmer, found something odd. A torn piece of paper caught in a crack near the door. It was yellowed, with faded ink spelling out half a name, Croft. He showed it to Hurst, who tucked it into his pocket. "Could be nothing," the constable said, but his voice lacked conviction. The mill felt wrong, its silence too heavy, and the fog curling through the open roof didn't help. One woman, Mrs. Weatherby's niece, crossed herself and left early, muttering about curses. Meanwhile, Miss Marple lingered at the inn, chatting with Bessie to keep her there. She noticed Elias slip upstairs, his movements quick and quiet. Curiosity tugged at her. "Bessie, dear, might I use the upstairs washroom? My old bones aren't what they were." Bessie nodded, distracted, and Miss Marple climbed the narrow stairs. At the top, she paused outside Elias's room, hearing a faint rustle inside. The door was ajar, and through the crack, she saw him kneeling by his suitcase, pulling out a small, locked box. He glanced nervously at the window, where fog pressed against the glass like a living thing. Miss Marple stepped back, her heart beating a little faster. What was he hiding? Back at the mill, the search turned up little else. The volunteers grew tired, their lanterns dimming as the fog thickened. Hurst called it off, promising to return tomorrow. As the group trudged back to the village, Tommy lagged behind, daring to explore a side path. He froze when he saw it. A fresh footprint in the mud, too large for Mrs. Croft's small feet. It pointed toward the river, then vanished into the mist. Tommy ran to catch up, his breath short. "Constable, I found something," he shouted. But when they returned, the footprint was gone, smoothed over as if it had never been. Hurst sighed. "Tricks of the light, boy. Let's go." That afternoon, Miss Marple visited Dolly Bantry at the Manor House, a grand place with rose gardens now bare. Over tea, Dolly shared the latest gossip. "They're saying Elias Thorne was seen near the mill last night, Jane." Before the scream, old Mr. Jenkins swears he saw him by the bridge. Miss Marple raised an eyebrow, stirring her tea. Does he now? People see what they want in the fog. But her mind was racing. She recalled Elias's trembling hands, the locked box, and that telegram about a contested will. Could they be connected to the innkeeper's wife? As dusk fell, the village grew quieter. Doors locked early. Miss Marple walked home, her umbrella tapping the ground. She passed the churchyard, where gravestones leaned like tired sentinels. A flicker of movement caught her eye, a shadow darting behind a yew tree. She stopped, her breath catching. "Who's there?" she called softly. No answer came, only the rustle of leaves and the fog's cold embrace. She hurried on, her thoughts on Elias and that box. At home she locked her door, a rare habit, and sat by the fire, her knitting untouched. The scream from the previous night echoed in her memory, sharper now. Later, at the Fox and Hound, Elias stood by the bar, his voice low as he spoke to Mr. Croft. "I'm sorry about your wife," he said, his tone flat. Croft, red-eyed, grunted. "You were the last to see her, Thorne. She brought you supper, didn't she?" Elias stiffened. "She did," said goodnight and left. That's all. But his fingers gripped the bar too tightly. Bessie, wiping tables nearby, overheard and frowned. She hadn't seen Mrs. Croft leave the dining room that night. As midnight approached, the fog seemed to pulse with secrets. Miss Marple, unable to sleep, lit a candle and opened her notebook. She jotted down names: Elias Thorne, Mrs. Croft, the mill, the glove, the torn paper. Each was a piece of a puzzle, but the picture was still hidden. Outside, the wind moaned, carrying a faint sound. A low, mournful whistle, not quite human. She froze, her pen hovering. Was it the wind or something else? The phantom, if it existed, was growing bolder. Tomorrow, she decided, she would follow Elias herself. This chapter deepens the mystery, pulling us into the village's growing unease and the shadows surrounding Elias Thorne. The fog hides more than it reveals, but the truth is closer than anyone thinks, leading us into the next twist of this chilling tale. Chapter 3. The Whispered Past. The fog clung to St. Mary Mead like a stubborn guest, thinning just enough to reveal the village's golden autumn leaves, but never fully lifting. Miss Jane Marple woke early, her mind buzzing with the events of the past days. She brewed a pot of tea and sat at her kitchen table, the steam curling like miniature fog. The distant scream from the previous night lingered in her thoughts, sharp and unsettling. Today, she decided, she would dig deeper into Elias Thorne's story, for the village's growing unease pointed to him as much as to the phantom. At the Fox and Hound, breakfast was a sombre affair. Mr. Croft, red-eyed and unshaven, served porridge to a handful of guests, his usual chatter replaced by silence. Elias Thorne was absent, his chair empty. Bessie, the barmaid, whispered to Miss Marple as she dropped off a loaf of bread. "He left at dawn, miss. Said he was going for a walk, but he took that suitcase of his." Miss Marple's eyes narrowed slightly. A walk with a suitcase sounded less like a stroll and more like a plan. She thanked Bessie and headed toward the river, where Elias was last seen. The riverbank was quiet, its waters sluggish under the fog's weight. Miss Marple walked slowly, her umbrella tapping the ground like a metronome. She spotted fresh tracks in the mud, narrow like a man's dress shoes. They led to a small jetty where a rowboat bobbed, its rope loosely tied. She paused, picturing Elias rowing into the mist. Why the river? She followed the path further, her eyes catching a glint in the reeds. A silver cigarette case, engraved with the initials E.T. She slipped it into her pocket. her face unreadable. In the village, Constable Hurst was busy with new reports. A farmer, Mr. Grayson, claimed his shed was broken into overnight. Nothing was stolen, but a lantern was missing and the door's lock was smashed. Could be gypsies, Grayson grumbled, or that phantom everyone's on about. Hurst scribbled notes, his patience thinning. He organized another search, this time focusing on the woods beyond the mill. The volunteers, fewer now, trudged through damp leaves, their voices low. Tommy Pierce, ever bold, darted ahead and found a scrap of cloth snagged on a thorn bush. It was blue silk like the scarf Mrs. Croft often wore. "It's hers!" Tommy shouted, waving it. Hurst took it, his jaw tight. Another clue, but no answers. Miss Marple, returning from the river, stopped by the post office. Mrs. Price was sorting letters, her hands quick but her tongue quicker. "That Elias got another telegram this morning," she confided. "From some lawyer in London. Sounded urgent. Something about a family matter." Miss Marple nodded, her mind connecting dots. A contested will, a mysterious letter, and now another telegram. She thanked Mrs. Price and made her way to Dolly Bantry's manor house, hoping to learn more about Elias's movements. Dolly was in her drawing room, arranging chrysanthemums in a vase. "Jane, the village is in a state," she exclaimed, setting down her scissors. "They're saying Elias was seen near the woods last night, after that scream. Mrs. Weatherby's niece is convinced he's the phantom." Miss Marple sipped her tea, her expression calm. "People love a villain, Dolly, but let's not judge too quickly." She shared the cigarette case find, keeping her voice low. Dolly gasped. "You think he dropped it fleeing something?" Miss Marple only smiled, her thoughts guarded. That afternoon, Elias returned to the inn, his coat damp and his face drawn. He avoided the common room, heading straight upstairs. Miss Marple, lingering nearby under the pretense of borrowing a book from Mr. Croft, overheard raised voices from Elias's room. She crept closer, catching fragments. "It's too late now," Elias muttered as if to himself. "They'll find it if I don't act." A chair scraped, and silence followed. Miss Marple retreated, her heart quickening. What was he planning? As evening fell, the village gathered for a meeting at the church hall. Reverend Clement stood at the front, his voice soothing but firm. "We must stay calm," he urged. "Fear makes monsters of shadows." But the crowd was restless. Mr. Jenkins stood up, pointing a finger. "That Thornfellow's trouble. He was at the inn when Eleanor vanished, and now he's skulking about." Murmurs of agreement rose. Constable Hurst promised to question Elias, but his tired eyes showed doubt. Miss Marple, seated at the back, observed the faces, fearful, angry, curious. She noted young Lucy, the inn's maid, twisting her apron nervously. After the meeting, Miss Marple walked home, the fog curling around her like a cat. She passed the old oak by the church, its branches gnarled and bare. A faint rustle made her pause. She turned, seeing nothing but mist. Then a low whisper carried on the wind, not words, but a sound like a name repeated softly. "Eleanor," it seemed to say. Miss Marple gripped her umbrella tighter, her pulse steady despite the chill. She knew better than to believe in ghosts, but the fog was playing tricks, and someone was playing a game. Back home, she lit her fire and opened her notebook. She added the cigarette case, the telegram, and the blue silk to her list. Each clue was a thread, weaving a pattern she couldn't yet see. Elias's past, she sensed, held the key. As the clock chimed 10, a knock came at her door. Unusual for so late. It was Bessie, breathless. "Miss Marple, I saw something odd. Elias left the inn again, heading toward the old bridge. He looked scared." Miss Marple thanked her, her mind racing. The bridge led to the woods, where the silk was found. Tomorrow she would follow that trail. The fog outside thickened, swallowing the stars. Somewhere in its depths a figure moved silently, unseen. Miss Marple closed her notebook, her eyes sharp. The phantom, if it was real, was no ghost. It was human, and it was close. This chapter pulls us deeper into the web of suspicion, with new clues and a village on edge. The fog hides the truth, but Miss Marple's gaze is piercing, leading us toward the next unraveling. Chapter 4. The Bridge at Midnight. The fog in St. Mary Mead grew heavier, as if the village were sinking into a dream it couldn't wake from. Miss Jane Marple, undeterred by the late-night visit from Bessie, rose early, her mind fixed on the old bridge where Elias Thorne had been seen. She dressed warmly, her shawl tight against the morning chill, and slipped the silver cigarette case into her pocket. The bridge, an ancient stone arch over the river, was a place of village lore, lovers' trysts, smugglers' hideouts, and now, perhaps, something darker. Miss Marple set out, her steps quiet but purposeful, determined to uncover what drew Elias there. The bridge was shrouded in mist, its mossy stones slick with dew. The river below murmured, its surface hidden by swirling white. Miss Marple paused at the centre, her eyes scanning the ground. She noticed scuff marks in the dirt, as if someone had dragged something heavy. Bending down, she found a small brass button, its edge tarnished but etched with a faint crest. A lion's head. She tucked it away, her thoughts turning to Elias's fine coat, which she'd seen at the inn. Had he been here, and why? In the village, tension simmered. Constable Hurst, weary from sleepless nights, questioned locals at the market square. Mrs. Jenkins, the grocer's wife, was adamant. I saw lights near the bridge last night, flickering like signals. It's that Thorne, I tell you, her voice carried, drawing nods from passers-by. Hurst, sceptical but dutiful, added the bridge to his patrol route. He met Tommy Pierce, who was delivering bread and chattering about a ghostly glow he'd seen by the river. It moved, Constable, like it was dancing, Hurst sighed, rubbing his temples. Enough of that, lad. Stick to facts. Miss Marple, returning from the bridge, stopped by the church to speak with Reverend Clement. The churchyard was silent, its gravestones half lost in fog. The Reverend was polishing brass candlesticks, his face drawn. Jane, the village is losing its nerve, he said. They're talking of curses now. Miss Marple nodded, mentioning the button she'd found. Curious, isn't it? A lion's crest isn't common here. The Reverend frowned, recalling a detail. Years ago, a family called Thornton lived near the mill. Wealthy folk with a crest like that. They left after some scandal. Debts, I think. Miss Marple's eyes gleamed. Thornton. Close to Thorne. At the Fox and Hound, Elias was back, his face haggard. He sat by the fire, nursing a glass of brandy, unaware of Miss Marple slipping in with a basket of eggs for Mr. Croft. She overheard Elias speaking to a stranger, a wiry man in a dark coat who'd arrived that morning. You can't keep running, the stranger hissed. The will's clear, but they're closing in. Elias's voice was sharp. Keep your voice down, Carter. Not here. They parted quickly, the stranger vanishing into the fog. Miss Marple, pretending to adjust her shawl, caught every word. Carter. Another piece of the puzzle. That afternoon, the search party shifted to the woods near the bridge. The trees stood like sentinels, their branches tangled in mist. Harry, the young farmer, led the group, his lantern casting eerie shadows. They found a hidden clearing where the ground was trampled, as if someone had paced there recently. In the centre lay a broken pocket watch, its glass cracked, hands frozen at midnight. Harry handed it to Hurst, who turned it over. Engraved on the back was "To E.C. with love." Eleanor Croft's watch. The group fell silent, the weight of the find sinking in. Miss Marple, hearing of the discovery through Dolly Bantry, visited the woods herself. Dolly tagged along, her spaniel sniffing eagerly. Jane, this is getting grim, Dolly said, clutching her coat. That watch, do you think she's gone? Miss Marple's face was calm. Let's not jump to conclusions, Dolly. Things left behind can be deliberate. She examined the clearing, noting the trampled grass led toward the bridge. Her mind churned. Elias's late-night walk, the button, the stranger named Carter. Were they staging something? As night fell, the village locked its doors. the fog now a symbol of dread. Miss Marple, undaunted, decided to watch the bridge herself. She hid behind a willow tree, its branches drooping low. The air was cold, the silence broken only by the river's soft rush. Around 11, footsteps echoed, a slow, deliberate crunch. Elias appeared, his suitcase in hand, glancing over his shoulder. He stopped at the bridge, setting the case down. Miss Marple held her breath as he opened it, revealing a bundle of papers and something glinting. A small knife, its blade catching the moonlight. He muttered, "It ends tonight," and tossed the papers into the river, watching them sink. Before Miss Marple could move, a shadow emerged from the fog. Carter, his dark coat blending with the night. "You're late," he snapped. Elias turned, startled. "I did what you asked. It's done." Their voices dropped, but Miss Marple caught enough. "The money, the estate. They'll never know." Carter grabbed Elias's arm, pulling him toward the woods. Miss Marple stayed still, her heart pounding. She waited until their footsteps faded, then hurried home. The knife's glint burned into her memory. At her cottage, she lit a candle and added to her notebook the button, the watch, Carter's arrival, the knife. The Thornton family scandal, mentioned by the Reverend, nagged at her. Was Elias a Thornton tied to that old estate? And what of Mrs. Croft's watch, left so conveniently? The fog outside seemed to whisper answers, but they were just out of reach. As she blew out the candle, a distant thud echoed from the river, a sound like something heavy hitting water. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. The phantom was no spectre, but a plan unfolding. This chapter tightens the web of clues, drawing us closer to Elias's secrets and the truth behind the fog. The bridge holds answers, and Miss Marple is ready to cross it. Chapter 5. The river's secret. The fog over St. Mary Mead hung like a shroud, its tendrils curling through the village as dawn broke with a pale, reluctant light. Miss Jane Marple, sleepless after her midnight vigil at the bridge, sat at her desk with a cup of tea, her notebook open. The thud she'd heard by the river echoed in her mind, heavy with meaning. Elias Thorne's whispered words, the glinting knife, and the mysterious Carter weighed on her thoughts. Today, she resolved to trace the river's path, certain it held the next clue to the village's unravelling mystery. She set out early, her sturdy boots navigating the muddy riverbank. The air was damp, the fog softening the outlines of willows that leaned over the water. At the bridge, she paused, examining the spot where Elias had stood. The scuff marks were still there, but now she noticed something new. A faint smear of red on a stone, barely visible in the grey light. Blood, or perhaps rust, she cautioned herself, but she marked the spot in her mind. Following the river downstream, she found a narrow path leading to a secluded bend, where the water pooled in a quiet eddy. There, half hidden in the reeds, was a sodden scarf, its blue silk matching the one found in the woods. Miss Marple's lips tightened. Another of Mrs. Croft's belongings, too carefully placed. In the village, Constable Hurst was grappling with mounting unease. At the town hall, he met with a small group of locals, their faces drawn. Mr. Grayson, the farmer, reported another oddity. A rope missing from his barn, the same one broken into days before. "It's no coincidence," he insisted, his voice loud. "Someone's using my tools for mischief." Hurst nodded, his notebook filling with questions. He sent Tommy Pierce to fetch the Reverend, hoping a calming word might ease the crowd. Tommy, eager as ever, darted off, but lingered by the river, where he spotted a glint in the water. He fished out a small key, tarnished but sturdy, and ran to show Hurst. "Found it near the bridge," he panted. Hurst turned it over, frowning. It didn't match any lock at the inn. Miss Marple, returning from her river walk, stopped by the Fox and Hound. The common room was nearly empty, the usual chatter replaced by whispers. Bessie, wiping tables, looked pale. "Miss Marple, Mr. Croft's taken to bed. Says he can't go on without Eleanor." Miss Marple patted her hand. "He's grieving, dear, but we'll find answers." She noticed Elias's absence again, and a quick word with Bessie confirmed he'd left at first light, carrying a small sack. Said he was visiting the mill, Bessie added. The mill, Miss Marple thought, where the torn paper with Croft was found. She thanked Bessie and headed out, her umbrella a steady companion. At the mill, the air was thick with the smell of damp wood and decay. The old structure creaked, its water wheel still. Miss Marple circled it, her eyes sharp. Near the back entrance, she found a muddy boot print, too large for Elias's narrow shoes, but fresh, as if someone had been there hours ago. Inside, the mill was a maze of shadows, dust motes dancing in slants of light. She climbed to the loft, where a loose floorboard caught her attention. Lifting it, she found a hidden space containing a single letter, its seal broken. The wax bore the same lion's crest as the button from the bridge. She tucked it into her shawl, her pulse quickening. The letter was addressed to E. Thornton, and its contents spoke of an inheritance dispute, with a deadline looming. Back in the village, Dolly Bantry caught up with Miss Marple near the church. "Jane, you're everywhere!" she exclaimed, her spaniel tugging at its leash. "They're saying Carter, that stranger, was seen arguing with Elias near the mill this morning. Mrs. Price overheard them talking about money." Miss Marple nodded, her mind fitting pieces together. The Thornton name, the crest, the letter. It all pointed to Elias hiding his true identity. But how did Mrs. Croft fit in? And what of that key Tommy found? As dusk settled, the fog thickened, cloaking the village in an eerie hush. Miss Marple joined a small search party by the river, led by Harry the farmer. They combed the banks, their lanterns casting feeble glows. Near the eddy where Miss Marple had found the scarf, Harry spotted something odd, a bundle of rope, half submerged, tied to a heavy stone. He pulled it up, revealing a knot so tight it suggested intent. "Looks like someone meant to sink something," Harry muttered. Hurst, arriving late, examined it. "Could be from Grayson's barn," he said, his voice grim. That night, Miss Marple sat by her fire. The letter from the mill spread before her. It detailed a legal battle over a Thornton estate, with Elias named as the sole heir, if he could prove his claim by month's end. A second name, Eleanor, appeared as a witness to the will. Miss Marple's eyes widened. Was Mrs. Croft more than an innkeeper's wife? She recalled the red smear on the bridge, the knife in Elias's suitcase. Had she seen something she shouldn't have? As the clock struck 11, a sharp knock startled her. It was young Lucy, the inn's maid, her face ashen. "Miss Marple, I found something in Elias's room while cleaning. A map with the river marked and a cross at the eddy." Miss Marple thanked her, her mind racing. The river was the key, and Elias was moving fast. Outside, the fog pulsed and a low moan carried on the wind. Not a whisper this time, but a cry, faint and desperate. Miss Marple gripped her notebook. The phantom was no ghost, but someone was running out of time. This chapter dives deeper into the river's secrets, with clues piling up and Elias's past coming into focus. The fog grows thicker, but Miss Marple's resolve is stronger, leading us toward the next twist. Chapter 6. The Map and the Motive. The fog over St. Mary Mead seemed to thicken with each passing hour, as if conspiring to bury the village's secrets deeper. Miss Jane Marple sat in her parlour, the fire casting long shadows across the room. The letter from the mill, with its lion's crest and mention of Eleanor as a witness, lay on her table beside the tarnished key found by Tommy Pierce and the blue silk scarf from the river's eddy. Young Lucy's revelation about the map in Elias Thorne's room burned in her mind. A cross marked at the eddy, too specific to be chance. Miss Marple sipped her tea, her eyes sharp behind her spectacles. The river was calling, and she would answer. But first, she needed to understand Elias's game. She rose early, the village still cloaked in a damp grey haze. Her cottage smelled of lavender and wood smoke, a comforting contrast to the unease outside. Tucking the letter and key into her handbag, she donned her heaviest shawl and set out for the Fox and Hound. The inn was quiet, its windows fogged over like clouded eyes. Inside, Mr. Croft slumped at the bar, his face etched with despair. Bessie, the barmaid, was scrubbing pots with a vigour that betrayed her nerves. "Morning, Miss Marple," she said, her voice low. "Elias hasn't come down yet. Been in his room since Lucy cleaned it." Miss Marple nodded, her gaze lingering on the stairs. "I'll just have a word with Mr. Croft," she said. But her real aim was to glimpse that map. Mr. Croft looked up as she approached, his eyes hollow. "No news, Miss Marple. It's like Eleanor's vanished into thin air." She offered a sympathetic smile, setting her basket of apples on the counter. "We'll find her, Mr. Croft. Sometimes answers hide in plain sight." As they spoke, she glanced toward the staircase, where Elias's door remained shut. She made a mental note to return later, when he was out. For now, she needed to see the river's eddy again, where the map's cross pointed. The riverbank was a world of shadows, the fog weaving through reeds and willows like ghostly threads. Miss Marple followed the path to the eddy, her umbrella tapping rhythmically. The water was still, its surface a mirror for the mist. She knelt carefully, her knees protesting, and examined the spot where the rope and scarf were found. The bank showed signs of disturbance. Trampled grass, a faint gouge in the mud, as if something heavy had been dragged. Her fingers brushed the ground, uncovering a small rusted padlock, its loop broken. She held it up, comparing it to the key from Tommy. They matched perfectly. Her lips pursed. A lock, a key, a map. What was Elias hiding at the eddy? Back in the village, Constable Hurst was swamped with reports. At the market square, villagers gathered, their voices a mix of fear and frustration. Mrs. Weatherby, wrapped in her shawl, insisted she'd heard footsteps near her cottage last night, followed by a splash. "It's that phantom, mark my words," she declared. Hurst, his moustache drooping, tried to calm her. "We're doing all we can, ma'am. Found a rope yesterday and now a key. We're closing in." But his confidence was thin, and the crowd sensed it. Young Tommy Pierce, hovering nearby, piped up, "I bet it's that Carter fellow. He's been skulking about, whispering with Thorne." Hurst made a note to find Carter, who'd been scarce since his argument with Elias. Miss Marple, leaving the river, stopped by the post office to see Mrs. Price. The postmistress was sorting telegrams, her eyes bright with gossip. "Another one came for Thorne this morning," she confided. "From that same London lawyer. Something about finalising the claim. He looked rattled when I handed it to him." Miss Marple thanked her, her mind turning to the Thornton estate mentioned in the Mills letter. Elias, or perhaps E. Thornton, was tied to a fortune, but why the secrecy? And why was Eleanor Croft's name on that document? At the manor house, Dolly Bantry was pruning her rose bushes, her spaniel dozing nearby. "Jane, you're out in this dreadful fog again," she exclaimed, brushing dirt from her gloves. Miss Marple shared the padlock find, keeping her voice low. "Dolly, do you recall any old stories about the Thornton family? A scandal, perhaps?" Dolly's eyes widened. "Oh, yes. They owned land near the mill decades ago. The son, Edward, ran off after a row over debts. Some said he forged a will to cheat his sister out of her share. She was called Eleanor, I think." Miss Marple's heart skipped. Eleanor Thornton. Could she be Mrs. Croft? That afternoon, Miss Marple returned to the inn, timing her visit when Elias was out walking. She persuaded Bessie to let her upstairs, claiming a lost hairpin. In Elias's room, she found the map tucked under a loose floorboard, a crude sketch of the river, with a red cross at the eddy and a scribbled note. Midnight. Safe. The word safe struck her. Was there a hidden safe at the eddy? She memorized the map and left, her thoughts racing. The padlock, the key, the knife, all pointed to something buried or sunk. As evening fell, the village grew hushed, the fog swallowing sounds. Miss Marple joined a search party near the bridge, where Harry the farmer was checking traps. They found a torn piece of paper in the underbrush, its ink smudged but legible. Meet me at the eddy. Bring it. The handwriting matched the Mills letter. Harry handed it to Hurst, who muttered, "This is getting too deep for me." Miss Marple stayed silent, her mind on Elias and Carter. Were they working together or against each other? That night, she waited by her window, the fog pressing against the glass. At 11:30, she slipped out, her shawl tight, and made her way to the eddy. Hiding behind a willow, she watched. Midnight came, and Elias appeared, his sack slung over his shoulder. Carter followed, his steps stealthy. "You've got it?" Carter whispered. Elias nodded, kneeling by the water. He pulled a small metal box from the sack, its lid locked with a padlock like the one Miss Marple found. He used a key, identical to Tommy's, to open it, revealing a stack of documents and a glinting object, a ring set with a dark stone. "The Thornton seal," Elias said, his voice low. "Proof enough." Carter reached for it, but Elias pulled back. "Not until I'm clear," he snapped. Their voices rose, then stopped as a twig snapped nearby. Miss Marple froze, her breath shallow. The men vanished into the fog, leaving the box behind. She waited, then crept forward, examining it. The documents inside bore the lion's crest, and one name stood out: Eleanor Thornton Croft. Miss Marple's eyes widened. Mrs. Croft was no bystander. She was at the heart of this. As she turned to leave, a low groan came from the river, followed by a splash. She peered into the fog but saw nothing. Her heart pounded, but she hurried home, the box's contents etched in her mind. The phantom was a fiction, but the danger was real, and Elias was running out of time. This chapter unveils a tangled web of identity and greed, with the river revealing its secrets. Miss Marple's pursuit grows bolder, pulling us toward the truth hidden in the fog. Chapter 7. The Seal of Secrets. The fog over St. Mary Mead seemed to breathe with a life of its own, swirling through the village as if guarding its darkest truths. Miss Jane Marple sat by her fire, the Thornton seal ring from Elias's box glinting in her memory. The documents she'd glimpsed, naming Eleanor Thornton Croft, confirmed her suspicion. Mrs. Croft was no mere innkeeper's wife, but a key to the Thornton estate. The groan and splash from the river's eddy haunted her, hinting at danger closing in. Miss Marple's hands rested on her notebook, her mind piecing together the puzzle. Elias, Carter, the will, and a woman who vanished into the mist. Today she would press closer to the truth, starting with the one place Elias hadn't been seen: the old Thornton Manor. She rose with the dawn, the village still cloaked in a heavy, damp haze. Her cottage was warm, its walls lined with books and photographs, but the chill of the mystery urged her out. She wrapped herself in a thick scarf, tucked the key and padlock into her handbag, and headed toward the manor, a crumbling estate beyond the mill. The path was overgrown, brambles snagging her skirt, but Miss Marple moved with quiet determination, her umbrella a steady guide. The manor loomed ahead, its ivy-choked walls and broken shutters like a face scarred by time. Village tales spoke of its last Thornton owner, Edward, who fled after a scandal. Was Elias that same Edward returned under a false name? At the manor's gate she found the lock rusted but intact. The key from the river fit perfectly, clicking open with a faint groan. Miss Marple stepped inside, her eyes adjusting to the dimness. The air smelled of mildew and forgotten lives, with dust thick on the floor. She moved carefully, her footsteps echoing in the empty hall. In a corner, she spotted a faded portrait, a stern man with Elias's sharp cheekbones, a lion's crest pin on his coat. The nameplate read, "Edward Thornton, 1890. Her breath caught. Elias was no stranger to this place. In the village, Constable Hurst was fraying at the edges. The town hall buzzed with anxious locals, their voices sharp. Mr. Jenkins, the grocer, waved a newspaper. "It's been days since Eleanor vanished. Why haven't you questioned Thorne properly?" Hurst, his moustache twitching, promised action. "We're watching him, Jenkins. Found that key and rope. Evidence is building. But privately, he felt lost, the clues piling up without a clear path. Tommy Pierce, lingering nearby, boasted of spotting Carter near the manor at dusk. "He was carrying a spade, Constable, like he was digging." Hurst sent Harry the farmer to check the manor grounds, hoping for answers. Miss Marple, inside the manor, climbed a creaking staircase to a study. Papers littered a desk, yellowed but legible. Deeds to the Thornton estate, naming Edward and Eleanor as heirs. A newer letter, dated weeks ago, demanded proof of identity to claim the land, or it would pass to a distant cousin. Miss Marple's lips tightened. Elias needed the seal ring to prove his claim, but why was Eleanor's name involved? She searched further, finding a hidden drawer with a photograph. A young Eleanor, arm in arm with a man resembling Elias, both smiling. The back read, "Edward and Eleanor, 1925. Siblings, she realized, her mind racing. Outside, the fog muffled a distant shout. Miss Marple slipped the photograph into her handbag and hurried to a window. Through the mist, she saw Harry approaching, his lantern bobbing. He was examining a patch of disturbed earth near the manor's well, where fresh dirt suggested recent digging. Miss Marple joined him, her presence startling the young farmer. "Miss Marple, what are you doing here?" She smiled faintly. "Curiosity, Harry, what's this?" He pointed to the soil. "Looks like someone buried something, then dug it up. Found this." He held up a torn glove, matching the one from the river, embroidered with EC. Back at the Fox and Hound, Elias was in the common room, his face pale as he read a telegram. Miss Marple, entering with a basket of scones, overheard Bessie whispering to Lucy, "He's been jumpy all morning, asked if anyone's been near his room." Miss Marple lingered, pretending to adjust her scarf, and caught Elias muttering to himself, "Carter's gone too far. If they find it, I'm done." He didn't notice her, his eyes fixed on the fire. She noted his coat, missing a button, the same lion's crest as the one she'd found. The pieces were aligning. That afternoon, Dolly Bantry invited Miss Marple for tea. The manor house was warm, its windows steamed from the kettle. "Jane, the village is a tinderbox," Dolly said, slicing cake. "They're saying Carter's involved in Eleanor's disappearance. He was seen near the river again." Miss Marple shared the photograph, watching Dolly's reaction. "Good heavens, that's Eleanor Croft." "She was a Thornton." Miss Marple nodded. "It seems so. And Elias, or Edward, is her brother. The estate's worth a fortune, but only if he proves his claim." Dolly gasped. "You think he did something to her?" As night fell, the fog grew denser, swallowing the village's lights. Miss Marple, restless, decided to revisit the river's eddy. She moved silently, her shawl blending with the mist. At the eddy, she found fresh footprints. 2 sets, one matching Elias's narrow shoes, the other heavier, likely Carter's. A glint caught her eye, a small vial, half buried in the mud, its label faded but hinting at a sedative. She pocketed it, her mind on the knife from Elias's suitcase. Had someone been drugged then moved? Near midnight, she heard voices by the bridge. Hiding behind a tree, she saw Elias and Carter, their silhouettes tense. "You promised to handle it," Elias hissed. Carter's voice was cold. "I did. She's gone like you wanted. But the ring's not enough. Where's the deed?" Elias clutched his sack. "Safe. You'll get your share when I'm clear." They parted, Carter vanishing toward the manor, Elias toward the inn. Miss Marple waited, her heart steady despite the chill. The groan she'd heard last night. Was it Eleanor or something else? At home, she added the vial, glove and photograph to her notebook. The Thornton siblings, a contested will, a hidden deed. Elias was desperate, and Carter was no innocent. The fog outside moaned, and a faint cry echoed again, closer now. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. The phantom was a lie, but the river held a truth she was close to unmasking. This chapter tightens the noose around Elias's secrets, revealing Eleanor's true identity and a motive steeped in greed. The fog hides the final clue, but Miss Marple's pursuit is relentless. drawing us toward the next revelation. Chapter 8. The Well's Whisper. The fog in St. Mary Mead clung to the village like a secret too heavy to lift, its grey tendrils weaving through the night, as if guarding the truth about Eleanor Croft's fate. Miss Jane Marple sat by her window, the vial from the river's eddy resting on her table beside the Thornton photograph and the lion's crest button. The cry she'd heard last night, sharp and close, echoed in her mind, mingling with Elias's heated words to Carter about a deed and a share. The Thornton Manor's well, with its freshly disturbed earth, tugged at her instincts. She sensed the mystery's heart lay there, buried in the shadows of the past. With dawn breaking, Miss Marple resolved to investigate the well, certain it held answers to the phantom's game. She stepped out into the mist, her coat buttoned tight against the morning's chill. The village was hushed, its cottages barely visible through the fog's veil. She made her way to the Thornton Manor, the path now familiar but no less eerie. The manor's silhouette loomed, its broken windows like dark eyes watching her approach. At the well, the air felt heavier, the fog pooling in the low ground. The disturbed earth Harry had found was messier now, as if someone had returned in haste. Miss Marple knelt, her gloved hands brushing the soil, and uncovered a small muddy cloth, embroidered with a faint T, like the Thornton crest. Her pulse quickened. Something had been hidden here, and recently. In the village, Constable Hurst was losing ground to the growing panic. At the church hall, a crowd gathered, their voices sharp with fear. Mrs. Price, the postmistress, waved a letter she'd held back. "This came for Carter yesterday, but he never picked it up. It's from London, marked urgent." Hurst opened it, his hands unsteady. The letter demanded Carter's presence at a solicitor's office regarding the Thornton estate, hinting at irregularities in the claim. Hurst's brow furrowed. "Where's Carter now?" No one knew. He'd vanished since his riverside meeting with Elias. Tommy Pierce, hovering nearby, whispered to a friend, "I saw him near the manor last night, digging again. Bet he's the phantom." Hurst sent a deputy to search for him, his patience worn thin. Miss Marple at the well peered into its depths. The fog made it hard to see, but a faint glint caught her eye far below. She tugged at the well's rope, its bucket long gone, and felt resistance. Something heavy was tied to it. With effort she pulled, her arms straining, until a small, waterlogged sack surfaced. Inside was a leather pouch, sealed with wax bearing the lion's crest. She opened it carefully, revealing a single document, a deed to the Thornton estate, naming Edward Thornton as sole heir, but with Eleanor's signature scratched out. Miss Marple's lips tightened. This was the deed Elias and Carter had argued over, and someone had tried to hide it. Back at the Fox and Hound, Elias was in the common room, his face drawn as he packed a small bag. Bessie, polishing glasses, watched him warily. "Leaving so soon, Mr. Thorne?" she asked, her tone sharp. Elias muttered about business in London, avoiding her gaze. Miss Marple, entering with a basket of pears as her excuse, noted his haste. She lingered, chatting with Mr. Croft, who was stirring soup with a trembling hand. "I keep hearing her voice in the fog," he whispered. "Like she's calling me." Miss Marple patted his arm, her eyes on Elias as he slipped out the back door, bag in hand. She followed at a distance, her steps silent on the damp cobbles. Elias headed toward the woods, where the fog was thickest. Miss Marple trailed him, her shawl blending with the mist. He stopped at a clearing near the manor, where a fallen oak lay like a giant's corpse. Kneeling, he dug with his hands, unearthing a small tin box. Miss Marple, hidden behind a tree, watched as he opened it, revealing a stack of pound notes and a photograph. Eleanor, older now, standing by the inn. Elias's face twisted, a mix of guilt and fear. "I'm sorry, Eleanor," he muttered, shoving the box back into the earth. Before he could cover it, a shadow moved, Carter stepping from the fog, a spade in hand. "You thought you could cut me out?" he snarled, raising the spade. Miss Marple's heart raced, but she stayed still, her eyes locked on the scene. Elias stood, his voice low. "You got your share, Carter. The deed's gone. Let it go." Carter laughed, a harsh sound. "Gone? I know you hid it, and I know what you did to her." Their argument grew heated, words tumbling over each other. Accusations of betrayal. A plan gone wrong. Carter swung the spade, but Elias dodged, grabbing his arm. They struggled, stumbling into the fog, their grunts fading. Miss Marple crept forward, retrieving the tin box. The photograph inside showed Eleanor with a man. Not Elias, but Carter, years younger, their hands clasped. She hurried back to the village, the box tucked under her shawl. At the church, she found Reverend Clement polishing the altar, his face weary. "Jane, you look troubled," he said. She showed him the photograph, keeping her voice low. Eleanor was tied to both men, Elias as her brother, Carter as something more. The estate was their prize, but at what cost? The Reverend paled. "You think they harmed her?" Miss Marple didn't answer, her mind on the cry from the fog. That night, the village was silent, the fog a heavy curtain. Miss Marple sat by her fire, the deed and photograph beside her. The Thornton estate was the motive, but Eleanor's role, was she victim or conspirator? The Wells sack, the vial, the scratched-out signature, all pointed to a plan unravelling. As the clock struck midnight, a sharp crack echoed from the manor's direction, like a branch snapping under weight. Miss Marple rose, her eyes sharp. The phantom was no spectre, but a truth buried deep, and she was closer than ever to unearthing it. This chapter pulls us into the heart of betrayal, with the well revealing a critical clue and Elias's desperation laid bare. The fog hides the final truth, but Miss Marple's gaze cuts through, leading us to the next unravelling. Chapter 9. The Phantom's Face. The fog over St. Mary Mead pulsed like a living thing, its heavy veil muffling the village as if to smother its secrets. Miss Jane Marple sat by her fireside, the Thornton deed, and the photograph of Eleanor with Carter resting on her table. The crack she'd heard from the manor last night, sharp and ominous, lingered in her thoughts, hinting at a struggle. Or worse, Elias's whispered apology in the woods, Carter's raised spade, and the buried tin box painted a picture of greed and betrayal. The phantom haunting the village was no ghost, but a human scheme unravelling, and Miss Marple was determined to unmask it. Today, she would confront the heart of the mystery, starting with the manor where the crack had echoed. She rose at first light, the fog still thick, wrapping the village in a grey cocoon. Her cottage was quiet, the ticking of her clock a steady anchor. She slipped the deed, photograph and vial into her handbag, then donned her warmest coat. The manor was her destination, its crumbling walls a silent witness to the Thornton family's past. The path was slick with dew, the air heavy with the scent of damp earth. As she neared the manor, she noticed fresh footprints in the mud, 2 sets, one narrow like Elias's, the other heavier, likely Carter's. They led to the back garden, where the well stood, its stones slick and dark. At the manor, the air felt charged, the fog swirling as if disturbed. Miss Marple approached the well, her eyes catching a new detail. A rope, freshly tied to the iron rung, dangling into the darkness. She tugged it gently, feeling a heavy weight below. Her heart quickened, but she didn't pull further. Too risky alone. Instead, she circled the manor, finding a side door ajar. Inside, the air was stale, the floorboards creaking under her careful steps. In the study, she found papers scattered, as if someone had searched in haste. Among them was a crumpled note in Elias's handwriting. "Carter knows too much. Meet at the well, midnight." Miss Marple's lips tightened. The crack last night. Was it a fight gone wrong? In the village, Constable Hurst was at his wits' end. The church hall was packed, villagers demanding answers. Mrs. Weatherby stood, her voice shrill. "I heard a noise by the manor last night. A crack, like something breaking. It's that phantom, I tell you." Hurst, his face lined with fatigue, held up a hand. We're searching the manor today. Found a letter about Carter. Shady business with the Thornton estate. He's our man to find. Tommy Pierce, eavesdropping, whispered to Harry. I saw Carter near the river at dawn, carrying a sack. Looked heavy. Hurst sent a deputy to the river, his hopes fading. Miss Marple, leaving the manor, met Dolly Bantry near the church. Dolly's spaniel tugged at its leash, sniffing the foggy air. Jane, you're out in this gloom again, Dolly exclaimed, her cheeks flushed. Miss Marple shared the note's contents, keeping her voice low. Elias and Carter are tied to the Thornton estate, Dolly. Eleanor was their sister, but something went wrong. A deed, a ring, a betrayal. Dolly gasped. You think they killed her? Miss Marple's eyes were steady. I think someone wanted her out of the way, but who? She didn't mention the rope in the well, not yet. At the Fox and Hound, the mood was grim. Mr. Croft was absent, tended by a neighbour, while Bessie managed the inn alone. Elias hasn't been back since yesterday, she told Miss Marple, pouring tea, and Carter's gone too. Lucy says she saw them arguing by the bridge at dusk. Miss Marple nodded, recalling the spade in Carter's hand. She slipped upstairs, using a forgotten shawl as her excuse, and checked Elias's room. The map was gone, but under the bed she found a torn receipt. London jewellers for a ring repair dated last month. The Thornton seal ring, she thought, her mind racing. That afternoon, the search party reached the manor, led by Hurst. Miss Marple joined them, her presence unassuming but her eyes sharp. At the well, Harry pulled the rope, his muscles straining. Up came a sack, dripping and heavy. The crowd gasped as Hurst opened it, revealing a bundle of clothes. Eleanor's, stained with mud and something darker, possibly blood. A small knife, its blade dulled, was tucked inside. Hurst's face paled. This is evidence now, he said, his voice tight. Miss Marple noted the knife matched the one she'd seen in Elias's suitcase. But where was Eleanor? As dusk fell, the fog grew denser, swallowing the village's lights. Miss Marple returned to the river, drawn by Tommy's tale of Carter's dawn visit. Near the eddy, she found fresh marks, draglines leading to a cluster of willows. Hidden among them was a small boat, its hull scratched. Inside lay a torn coat, Carter's, with a bloodstain on the sleeve. Miss Marple's breath caught. Had Carter met the same fate as Eleanor, or was he the hunter? She hurried back to the village, the fog pressing close. That night, she sat by her fire, the clues piling up. The deed, the ring, the knife, the blood-stained coat. Elias and Carter were partners in a scheme to claim the Thornton estate, but Eleanor's role, sister, witness, or obstacle, had sparked betrayal. The crack by the manor, the cry in the fog. Someone had paid a price. As midnight neared, a frantic knock shook her door. It was Lucy, the maid, her eyes wide. Miss Marple, I saw Elias by the well just now. He was pulling something up, and it looked heavy. Miss Marple grabbed her shawl. Stay here, dear, she said, her voice calm but firm. She reached the manor, the fog so thick she could barely see her hands. At the well, Elias stood, his face ashen, hauling a rope. A shape emerged, a body, limp and dripping. Miss Marple stepped forward, her voice cutting through the mist. Mr. Thorne, what have you done? Elias froze, his eyes wild. The fog seemed to hold its breath. The phantom's face finally clear. This chapter races toward the truth, with the well revealing a chilling clue and Elias caught in the act. The fog's grip tightens, but Miss Marple's resolve is unbreakable, leading us to the final unravelling. Chapter 10. The fog lifts. The fog over St. Mary Mead clung like a final act of defiance, its heavy swirls masking the manor's grim scene as Miss Jane Marple faced Elias Thorne by the well. His hands gripped the rope, a limp figure emerging from the depths, water dripping onto the muddy earth. The village slept, unaware of the truth unfolding in the midnight haze. Miss Marple's voice, steady despite the chill, cut through the silence. "Mr. Thorne, what have you done?" Elias's eyes, wild with panic, darted to the body, then to her. The phantom of St. Mary Mead was no spectre. It was a tangled web of greed, betrayal, and a desperate bid for a lost fortune. Tonight, Miss Marple would unravel it all. She stepped closer, her umbrella tapping the ground, her gaze unwavering. The figure on the rope was Carter, his dark coat sodden, his face pale and lifeless. A gash on his temple glistened, the blood mixing with river water. Elias dropped the rope, his hands trembling. "It wasn't supposed to end like this," he stammered, his voice breaking. Miss Marple's mind raced, piecing together the clues. The Thornton deed, the seal ring, Eleanor's scratched-out signature, the blood-stained knife, and now Carter's body. She spoke softly, her tone calm but firm. "Tell me, Edward Thornton, tell me about your sister, Eleanor." Elias flinched at the name, his shoulders sagging. The fog seemed to part slightly, as if the village itself demanded answers. He sank to his knees, the story spilling out like water from the well. Elias was indeed Edward Thornton, the disgraced heir who'd fled St. Mary Mead decades ago after forging a will to cheat his sister Eleanor out of her share of the Thornton estate. She'd left too, marrying Mr. Croft under a new name to escape the scandal. But the estate, tied up in legal battles, resurfaced last month with a new claim deadline. Elias returned, using the alias Thorne, to secure the fortune with the seal ring and deed, proof of his identity. Eleanor, as a witness to the original will, was a threat to his claim. Miss Marple listened, her eyes sharp. "So you came to silence her?" Elias shook his head, tears mixing with the mist. "No, I just wanted her to stay quiet. I offered her money, but she refused, said she'd tell the truth." Enter Carter, a former associate from Elias's London days, who'd tracked him down, greedy for a cut. Carter devised a plan. Stage Eleanor's disappearance to scare her into compliance, using the fog as cover. They lured her to the river with a forged note, claiming Elias needed her help. There, Carter used the sedative from the vial Miss Marple found to knock her out, planning to hide her at the manor until she agreed to sign over her claim. But the plan unravelled. Eleanor woke too soon, struggling at the eddy. Carter panicked, struck her with a stone, leaving her unconscious, or so he thought. They hid her in the manor's cellar, leaving her glove and scarf to fuel the phantom rumours. Elias, racked with guilt, argued with Carter, who demanded the deed and ring. Last night, at the well, Carter threatened to expose Elias unless he handed over everything. In a rage, Elias pushed him, and Carter fell, hitting his head on the well's edge. Desperate, Elias tied the body to the rope and sank it, hoping the river would hide his crime. Miss Marple's voice was gentle but piercing. "And Eleanor? Where is she now?" Elias's face crumpled. "I checked the cellar tonight. She's gone. I thought Carter moved her, but..." His voice trailed off. Miss Marple's heart sank, but a faint sound interrupted. A weak cry from the manor's direction. She turned, her eyes narrowing. "Stay here," she ordered, hurrying toward the sound, her umbrella a lifeline in the fog. Inside the manor, she followed the cry to the cellar, its door hidden behind a rotting tapestry. The air was damp, the stairs treacherous. At the bottom, she found Eleanor Croft, bound and shivering, her face bruised but alive. "Miss Marple," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "I woke up here. Carter left me." Miss Marple untied her, wrapping her shawl around Eleanor's shoulders. "You're safe now, dear. The fog can't hide you anymore." She helped Eleanor upstairs, her mind on Elias, still by the well. Outside, the fog was thinning, the first stars piercing the sky. Miss Marple returned to find Elias gone, his footprints leading to the river. Constable Hurst, alerted by a frantic Lucy who'd seen Miss Marple leave, arrived with Harry and a deputy. They found Eleanor, weak but alive, and carried her to the inn, where Mr. Croft wept with relief. Hurst's men searched the river, finding Elias hours later, drowned in the eddy, the Thornton ring clutched in his hand. Whether he'd slipped or chosen his fate, no one could say. The village awoke to a clearer dawn, the fog lifting at last. At the church hall, Miss Marple explained the truth to a stunned crowd. Eleanor, recovering, confirmed her past as Eleanor Thornton, estranged from her brother after his betrayal. Carter had exploited Elias's desperation, turning greed into murder. The phantom was their creation, a ruse to mask their scheme, fueled by the fog's eerie cover. The deed, now with Hurst, would settle the estate legally, with Eleanor as the rightful heir. Miss Marple walked home, the village quiet once more. The fog had hidden lies, but her sharp eyes had seen through it. Elias's guilt, Carter's greed, Eleanor's survival. As she sat by her fire, knitting resumed, she smiled faintly. Human nature, she thought, was the real phantom, predictable, yet always surprising. And there you have it, dear viewers. The mystery of the phantom solved, its secrets laid bare. If you've loved unraveling this tale with us, grab a cup of tea and hit that subscribe button. Your support means the world to us. Leave a comment below and tell us what you think. Stay curious, and we'll see you in the next story. This final chapter unveils every secret, tying up the Thornton legacy and the phantom's true face. The fog clears and Miss Marple's wisdom shines, closing our chilling tale.